Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Live here, and I'm not alone. I'm joined by
John
and
Zion.
That sounded like Super Smash Bros. I love it. Yes,
I tried. Thank you.
And yes, if you noticed recently, we published our Miitopia review that was written by My Fair Fingers. I stayed up, most of the night in order to play it enough to be able to get a review done in a timely fashion before the weekend, and I'm very pleased with how it turned out. But, it's time for these guys. These two here are going to properly put me through the ringer and pick me up on any inconsistencies. They're basically going to make me justify my review. Does my review hold the waters? Let's find out!
I'm cracking my knuckles now, Alex. So, this is a 5-year-old 3DS game that's been remastered for Switch, and the main new features are the makeup and the horse. Now, Nintendo are very, very... they want you to know that the horse is the new feature. On Twitter, they're like, oh, there's a horse in this game. They don't care about the makeup. And going through your review, you mentioned the horse maybe once. Do you think the horse is not important?
The horse isn't important.
Say it isn't so.
I mean, the horse is a perfectly fine addition, but it's not even really a full party member, and it doesn't really add any tactical advantage to the game because it just sometimes the horse will activate for one or any of your party, and it's just another character to form relationships with, and yeah, it's just not that important. I think you could probably leave the horse out and it would be fine. It's not bad by any stretch. It's not a bad addition. It's just a bit nothingy.
I just want to state for the record that out of context, Alex just said the horse will activate, and I don't know what that means out of context, but but it's a fun thought.
Basically, one of your party members will the horse will rear up, and then they will have access to horse attacks. That's okay. It. And you can't do your normal attack then, which can actually sometimes be a disadvantage. So, not very often, because the horse does more damage, but say if you've got a thief class, they attack all of the enemies at once with their standard attack. Not as strong, but even so. The horse, you can subsequently learn other moves when you get friendly with the horse, like one called Snort, where they deal, it attacks all of them. But the standard only does one attack.
So let's say little Jimmy is coming from 2016. He's played Miitopia, and he wants to buy the remake. What exactly is new for him apart from the Mii customization? Because it sounds like the horse he doesn't do anything. The horse is just kind of there. So is it just the Miis that are being enhanced?
I've got to be honest, I didn't play the original 3DS version. I familiarized myself with it as I should do, because it's not a remake really, it's a port of an old game, so I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was talking about. But no, I've not played the original 3DS version. What I would say in terms of what's new is what Nintendo has advertised, basically, which is the makeup and the horse. I suppose you could argue HD visuals and things like that, but
that buttery background.
Some of the backgrounds are gorgeous, they are really, really good looking. The models, I don't believe, as in the enemy models, I don't think they've actually been changed at all. Maybe some of the textures have been improved, but it's not clear. I actually kind of like the chunky polygon look, but I'm aware it's not going to be for everyone. And in a way, it kind of matches the polygonal look of the Miis, so I'm down with it.
So throughout the game, I know you can... I've heard that you can customize your party members, as you go. If you get bored with a certain character, you can swap it out to something else. Is that true?
Yeah, your party members, you can fully edit as much as you like, but it's way simpler for everything else. So characters like the Dark Lord and things like that, you can literally just go into a series of menus and just change the Mii on the fly, as long as you're in the right menu or whatever and not in the middle of combat, which is really good. It really helps to keep things fresh. You can do it with your party members as well, but you can't just select another Mii you've got. You have to go in and edit all the features individually. Originally, when I was playing the demo, I was playing with Doshin the Giant and Iwata as my first party member, because I thought, I can change it later, and I just wanted to try it out with another party member. And that eventually, Iwata eventually became Mushbert. But I had to go through and create Mushbert anew in the menus. I couldn't just say, use Mushbert from now on, which is a bit annoying. I don't know why they've done that, but at least you can do it.
Rightfully so, I'd say. A lot of your review focuses on the Miis, because it's Miitopia. The point is to build your own party and make it as crazy as you want to. But let's say this game didn't have the Miis. Would you still think this is a solid RPG?
I would say it would be a fine RPG. It would not get the score that I've given it. The Miis really are the big focus. If it were just, for example, any other characters, just like, say the cast of Bravely Default or anyone, a Final Fantasy cast, it would be okay as kind of like a very sort of low-level RPG, but no, the real joy in this comes from the Miis. So, as I said in the review, if you get in as much as you get out as much as you put in. So if you don't make the effort and make the Miis that you think will be fun, it's going to be a little bit anticlimactic, I think.
Yeah. I played the 3DS original, and in that game, the Miis just look like Miis. There's none of this crazy customization. So my opinion of the base game wasn't that hot. But I think because you can have PS1 Hagrid and Waluigi and Doshin, that does elevate it seems.
Yeah, I entirely agree. I think if I were to go back in theory and play the 3DS version now, I think I'd be maybe not disappointed, but I definitely wouldn't enjoy it as much.
Is there a certain point in the game where you found all of the characters and everything that you were injecting in really came together the best? Do you think it was the beginning, or is there a certain part way through the story or anything where there were just any funny scenes or anything that really made you laugh?
I think the funniest scenes are generally where you see the Miis that you've created for the first time, be they party members or something like that, just little things like Brian Butterfield running up to Doshin going, "Are you okay?" And Doshin going, "Brian." They're just, when you see them for the first time, it is pure magic. It gets, I wouldn't say boring, but it definitely doesn't have the same effect later down the line. But then there are still some story things that happen and some random interactions that can be really good fun that you don't expect. But it's definitely when you first start injecting them in, and then later on where various different characters kind of worlds cross and things like that. There's definitely still joy to be had in the latter half of the game. But the first, it's definitely strongest at the beginning, I think.
What's your opinion on the twerky enemy?
I don't like twerky. I mean, I suppose it was more relevant in the original 3DS version. It's more memey at the time and things like that. But nowadays it sort of feels like, I don't know whether you've seen, either of you seen Black Panther, but there's a scene where one of the characters goes, "What are those?" which is a reference to a meme I wasn't even fully aware of at the time. But even I could tell that it was outdated. It feels a little bit like that. I mean, twerking is definitely still a little bit more timeless than most memes, but even then, I'm just pleased it doesn't show up too often.
In your review, you mentioned that there's some frame rate drops. You say they're not too noticeable. They don't happen too frequently, I should say. But are they still fairly noticeable when they do happen?
They're noticeable to me, but I don't know. I must admit, when I originally wrote the review, I must have had a strange brain attack because I thought the game was running at 60 frames a second. Obviously, I noticed because the review doesn't say that, but I just had this strange brain attack where I thought it was running at 60. But I'm quite sensitive to frame rates because of the work that we all do. And it was noticeable to me, but it was generally only in cutscenes, actually. Sometimes it happened in combat, but generally it was just when two Miis were near a light source or something. It was really bizarre. I couldn't tell you exactly what was causing it, but it didn't spoil the experience. It was just kind of slightly jarring every so often, I would say.
As far as the story goes, what is the point of all of this? Like, why are you putting all these characters together? You know, I mean, I played a bit of the demo, but it didn't really, like, the story didn't really there was no, the story is not what I remember from playing the demo. It was all of the characters. But does the story feel like it has any weight at the end of the day? Or is it really just the characters that you're playing for?
The characters, I would say that the narrative is good. The plot is very sort of like thin overall, but the narrative is good. The way that the plot is enacted, I would, and that's again down to the me's that you put in. You know, just again seeing all of these characters that you've put in yourself in these situations where they do not belong is kind of wonderful. But the main plot is just literally the Dark Lord. I mean, without getting too much into spoiler territory, the Dark Lord is stealing people's faces in order to put them on monsters that he's created, because his monsters are weak without faces. And so he needs faces from people. That's, and you're like, oh, not anymore, mate. I'm gonna put a stop to you. And that's basically it.
Wow, what a treat.
So when it comes to the gameplay itself, the exploration is sometimes non-existent, isn't it? Like, you kind of go around a map and it's kind of automated. Did that ever get a bit draining on you?
It did and it didn't. The world maps can be quite interesting, actually, you know, sort of like hidden paths and everything. They're nothing to write home about, but they're a little bit more, I don't want to say intricate, but a little bit more appealing than they appear at first glance. It's, I would have liked more exploration, and there are certainly elements of it, you know, like hidden paths when you're going through, you know, you get like branching paths when you're in the walking sections, which are a bit weird. And that can open up new paths in the overworld, and that's kind of fun, but it's they're kind of sporadic, those instances.
Are there any segments beyond the towns or maybe someone's house or something like that that are not automated, like dungeons, or is the majority of the game set on, I don't want to say on rails, but on a track, so to speak? It's when you're in the overworld, there are some things that happen in the overworld, but generally it's when you get into the individual, I hasten to call them levels, but for lack of a better term. But you can like move and walk around, as you say, in like the towns and stuff like that. But that's kind of a means to an end. It doesn't really go any further than that, which is a bit of a shame. But I think they had a clear vision with what they wanted to do. And I think part of it was kind of simplifying things. Maybe they went a little bit too far, but they are at least consistent with it.
I'm going to ask an unfair and tough question.
Okay.
So this game had a free demo, and that caught on like wildfire. Like, Twitter was full of me's, and everyone was playing and sharing this game. Do you think that there is more value in the demo in a sense? As in, people, does the fun of this come from creating and sharing me's, which you can do for free? What's the incentive to go out and buy the game?
I suppose maybe giving them purpose and actually seeing them move, and actually in the interactions that I've mentioned that really are just like the best part of the game. The Miis themselves, you know, are excellent. You can get so much variety in there, so many weird and wacky things that you've never been able to do before. And it's fine to just create them, and it's kind of impressive to see what other people have done. But, you know, Madeline from Celeste only really comes to life when you see her, you know, sort of doing press-ups with Diglett. It's seeing them interact and seeing them live, for lack of a better term, that really gives things, kind of gravity. Again, it's the demo, isn't it? If you go and play the demo and you sort of think, oh, I like making the Miis, but I'm not so keen on the gameplay, then it's probably better to give this one a pass. But if you enjoy the gameplay, then I think you could have an awful lot of fun.
How long does it take to actually design a character? Because that's something I still have not done.
They can be really complex, can't they?
Yeah, they can be very complex, and you could say how long's a piece of string. For the more sort of like human characters, I generally went for more of a me aesthetic, like Brian Butterfield, a Peter Serafinowicz character. And they are generally a little bit simpler because there's kind of like you've got an expectation. Like in your head, the Brian Butterfield is going to look like a me because it's a real person. Brian Butterfield took me about, I think, maybe 15, 20 minutes to create, and That was from start to finish. I'm going to make Brian Butterfield to there he is. But a character like I did like King DDD that I made, which was, I'm actually really pleased with that me overall. That took me, I think, 45 minutes, which is quite a long time, to be honest. And that was including a little bit of trial and error, but generally, sort of that was a relatively smooth creation. It's and if you want to go even more detailed, a character that's more detailed, some people have created like the Mona Lisa, for example. You could spend hours on a me if you wanted to, and it's probably going to be like diminishing returns at a certain point. But yeah, you can create some pretty good me's if you've got a creative mind. You understand how the system works. You can create a pretty good me in about half an hour, I would say. Like I think Madeline took me about half an hour. Chris Simpson's artist, that took me probably about half an hour as well. That's still one of my favorite ones that I've made because it's so accurate. But yeah, about half an hour.
I'm going to think outside my own bubble a moment, because I look at this game and I know the RPG mechanics are a little bit too simple for me and I get a bit bored with it. But this probably wasn't made for me. It was probably made for someone who doesn't really play RPGs and just wants to play a game with the faces of their friends in there. So for that person, do you think that this feels like a different gap in the Switch market? Because there aren't really other Switch games that are like this.
Oh god, does it fill a gap in the Switch market? Jesus. It's so hard to tell.
It's a casual game, I guess.
Yeah, it really is. I was surprised because overall I thought the general sort of thoughts surrounding this game were generally just sort of mixed, Nobody was like head over heels in love with it and anything like that. But then looking at some of the comments that we've had, some people have just like commented like even I think within the first like 5 minutes. So nobody had even been able to see the whole blooming video by that point because it's over 10 minutes long, just saying, yes, it's worth it. And it's like, what? Come on. I didn't think some people thought so strongly about it. It's really good fun, but I think, it's one of those games where it's kind of Marmite-y. It's people are going to love it or hate it. And so it was actually quite difficult to review as a result. So, oh God, does it fill a gap? I don't know. It's such a weird game.
Yeah.
It doesn't really... I wouldn't say it does fill a gap. I think it's it's like a tangent to the Switch library. It's not like it's filling in a gap per se, but it's kind of going off on its own branch. So it's a nice little bonus. It's DLC the game. That's a terrible description for it.
I do want to see more like 3DS remasters, like games that were designed for pick up and play handhelds rather than just the console experiences. So hopefully this is like the start of that.
Yeah, I would hope so as well. It's very much a pick up and play. I blasted through it. That is absolutely not the way this game was intended to be played. But that's just the nature of how it goes sometimes. The game constantly sort of gives you the option after playing for like 10 or 15 minutes, whether you want to continue or stop playing for now.
So now that you just mentioned the fact that the game kind of asks you if you want to stop playing after 10 or 15 minutes, I almost said seconds for some reason, but that wouldn't make any sense.
Like
That'd be terrible.
Sometimes.
Does it feel like the game is more ready for like pick up and play aspects or the pick up and play nature where like most RPGs feel like they want you to sit down and spend a few hours with them? Does it feel like you should be playing this in smaller increments?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that seems to be the way that it's designed, and I think if you were to play it the way I played it, which was to sit down and play through the old bloomin' thing, you would sort of potentially get a bit tired of it at times. And I did before I went to sleep. I was almost worried because when I slept for 2 hours. Just when I went to bed, I was like, oh God, I don't really want to keep playing. And that's a bad sign whenever you're reviewing a game. But then I woke up 2 hours later and I was like, ooh, I get to play it again. And I was looking forward to it. So I think, it definitely deserves some rest times rather than long stints for sure.
So now that you've played through Miitopia and, it seems like it's a more simple RPG, so to speak, do you have the want to go play something more serious, something beefier?
That's a really good question, actually. I've not really thought about it because I couldn't look at Miitopia directly for a while after doing the review. But I haven't actually had any drive to play any RPGs, I've got to say. I've not really had a lot of drive to play games at all, but that's probably just because I've been having... I had quite a busy weekend. I played some Subnautica, but that was it. But yeah, I mean, I suppose in a way, the fact that the combat was so simple did kind of make me yearn for slightly more complicated systems. Nothing too OTT, but I've often been tempted to play something like Into the Breach, which I know isn't an RPG per se. It's more of a turn-based thing. But now that I'm saying it, I'm kind of thinking, I want to play something more tactical, because the game, it has some tactical elements, but it really is quite a straightforward experience. So yeah, I would say it has kind of, now that I'm thinking about it, I do actually want to play something more tactical, which is nice, because I've kind of fallen off the tactical horse recently. I bought Fire Emblem Three Houses a couple of years ago, well, when it came out, and I still haven't played it properly. I kind of started it and then just left it alone. And I couldn't tell you why exactly, but maybe I'll give it another go.
Well, now that you've played Miitopia, and it sounds like, we've punched out a bunch of negatives, but you still enjoyed the experience quite a lot to give it a 7.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's say that they did a sequel of like a strategy RPG, like Fire Emblem-wise, but with Miis. Would you be up for that after playing this?
You know what? As long as they could keep the same sort of irreverent humor and things like that, and maybe even expand upon it further, and maybe have potentially, I don't know whether they would do this, but like Miis fighting Miis, so you could have like enemy factions and you could build those in the game and everything like that. I mean, you'd lose your entire life to creating Miis, but if in theory you could do that, you could have some like, there's some negative interactions in Miitopia, but generally it's all about friendship, and sometimes they fall out and stuff like that. And that's entertaining, especially when it comes to combat. It's entertaining and irritating in equal measures, but in kind of a fun way. So if you could have something where, like a sort of, you create the enemy as well, you're supposed to, you technically do with the Dark Lord, but on a sort of a grander scale, yeah, I'd be up for that. I think you could get some really interesting interactions going between, sort of like Miis on your side and Miis not on your side. Yeah, I'd be well up for that. Just
give it like 3 or 4 years, and just like Octopath, we'll have Project Triangle Square, of Miitopia, and it just makes sense, right?
Just very off topic, but I've got to say, Project Triangle Strategy is the most ludicrous name for a game I think I've heard in a very long time.
It's just a lot of fun to mispronounce its name, or just completely get it wrong.
So, guys, do you think that I've successfully defended and added an additional layer of creamy goodness to my review? Are you satisfied with my creamy layer?
Oh, stop saying creamy.
I can't.
I am satisfied.
I can't do it.
You've done a great job, Alex. I feel like your review was already very thorough, but we've got even more points out of here. It's great to have this long format to discuss it. So well done defending your score.
Thank you.
Yeah, it makes sense that the game is the creation side is the majority, or the positive side that pushes the game through. But I'm glad to hear that, even after you've played it that much, that it, that the combat didn't like push you away either. So yeah, it's all good to hear.
I'm very pleased to hear it. If you missed our review for whatever reason, you want to know what the blithering hell we're talking about, make sure you check the link in the description. But all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you create the Nintendo Life logo and that subscribe button as me in Miitopia. Please not the Dark Lord. And be sure to check out nintendolife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.